2 minutes. That's the window investigators keep coming back to. A tiny, terrifying slice of time in which a 5-year-old vanished from a family yard and a long list of questions outpaced any answers. Hit subscribe and ring the bell now to get first-hand updates on this story and every new development as investigators sort fact from rumor. Electrical workers spent a week on the Wells property just before Summer's disappearance. In the days before June 15, 2021, utility crews arrived at the Wells property to do routine work. At first glance it was nothing unusual, a small team, trucks with ladders, and the kind of noise rural homes expect from outside contractors. But in missing person investigations, ordinary details become important fast, and the presence of those workers has taken on extra significance because it changed who had reason to be on the land and who knew the family's rhythms. For nearly a week, those crews moved around the property. They had access to areas most visitors would not: driveways, side gates, and service entrances. They came and went at predictable times, often taking breaks in sight of the house or parking their vehicles in the same spots. This allowed them to map, accidentally or intentionally, subtle routines, where children liked to play, which doors were habitually left open, and which areas of the yard were least supervised at certain times of day. For investigators, access equals opportunity. For a potential abductor, familiarity with a property can turn complex planning into simple execution. It's also worth remembering what utility crews are asked to do. They often need to be close to electrical panels, meters, and exterior service lines, places that can provide discreet movement and that often let someone slip in and out without attracting attention. Workers carry equipment, wear uniforms, and in many communities, they are trusted figures. That trust typically allows them to move without the same scrutiny strangers would face. Neighbors wave, children sometimes approach them, and dogs may treat them like benign visitors. This week-long presence complicates the timeline because it means non-family adults were repeatedly present in the exact space where a child later disappeared. Investigators will want to know, and likely have already asked, who those workers were, whether they were local employees or contractors from out of the area, what tools they had, and what work records show about their exact locations and times. Background checks, interviews, and cross-referencing with vehicle registrations or phone records can quickly turn an ordinary work detail into a critical investigative lane. It also raises practical questions that matter for forensics. Did any of the crew's vehicles remain on the property that night? Were personal items left behind? Did any crew member have a prior relationship with the family or show unusual interest in the children? Those are the kinds of details detectives chase because they help explain how someone could observe the property and move within it with minimal notice. Finally, the community effect is significant. Utility crews are visible and familiar, so their repeated activity could normalize a presence that otherwise would have stood out, an effect that, in hindsight, makes a disappearance at that time more plausible as an opportunistic event. For the family, neighbors, and investigators, the weeks after the vanishing included not only searches of the land itself, but also careful interviews to reconstruct who was there and what they saw. That week of work is one of the clearest examples of how mundane activities can gain heavy meaning after a child goes missing. Workers saw Summer playing alone daily, providing them access and familiarity with routines. Multiple witnesses say that during the days the crews were on site, they observed Summer playing outdoors, sometimes by herself. That detail may sound small, but in investigations of this kind it matters deeply. Regular visibility explains how someone could learn a child's habits, where she liked to play, what toys she preferred, and the times she was most likely to be unsupervised. People who observed a routine can use that knowledge to plan, whether their intent was benign or not. Children playing outdoors in a rural setting is common, but pattern recognition is powerful. If a worker saw the same child in the same place several days in a row, that worker, or anyone else who observed the work, would quickly form a mental map. They would note line-of-sight issues, such as whether the yard was shielded by trees, if the driveway was visible from the road, and how close the nearest neighbor was. That kind of informal surveillance is what often provides attackers with the confidence to act. They know the family's comings and goings, and they've built a low-risk profile of the property. From an investigative standpoint, the reports that workers saw Summer playing alone create several important lines of inquiry. Detectives would want to know the precise days and times of those observations, whether multiple crew members reported the same thing independently, and whether anyone left written notes or text messages that reference the child. Phone records and vehicle trackers can now be cross-checked with crew rosters to identify who was where and when. Interviews with the workers themselves, including whether they remember vehicles, visitors, or unusual activity during their breaks, can turn anecdote into corroborated timeline. Behavioral context also matters. A child who routinely plays in the same spot might display certain predictable behaviors, approaching strangers for candy, responding to a call from an adult, or running toward a familiar vehicle. If a worker was present for several days, they would quickly understand which small sounds or calls would draw the child's attention. That predictability lowers the perceived risk of contact for someone with bad intent, and it helps explain how a brief abduction could happen with minimal disturbances. For the family and community, the news that outsiders had regular sight of Summer in the days before she vanished has been unsettling. Something ordinary, yard work, now looks like the step that allowed a stranger to learn exactly where and when to strike. This is why investigators treat such reports seriously. They convert everyday behavior into an evidentiary path that can confirm who had the opportunity to commit a crime and who may have had the motive to cover their tracks. The basement door was left unlatched, giving a discreet entry point directly to Summer. The configuration of a family's home is always central to any missing child inquiry. In the Wells property, a basement door, a side or back entrance not always visible from the main yard, was reportedly left unlatched in the hours before Summer disappeared. A door like that is a practical detail, but it's a detail that can change everything. An unlatched door creates an immediate, low-effort access point that requires little force and produces no loud noise. For an abductor seeking speed and stealth, it's a gift. Investigators know that many abductions hinge on two simple elements: access and opportunity. An unlocked basement door provides both. Unlike a main entrance watched by family members or a front yard visible to neighbors, a basement or side door is often less noticed, especially in rural properties where parts of the house face trees or outbuildings. Someone approaching from that direction can move quietly, enter the structure, and exit through inner rooms without ever being seen from common vantage points. The presence of the unlatched door also intersects with the utility crew presence. Workers moving around the exterior may have left gates or doors open, or they may have inadvertently learned which doors were habitually unsecured. That knowledge could be passed among crew members or observed and later acted upon. Investigators will want to know whether the same crews ever entered the house to use a restroom or get a drink, actions that would give them even clearer intelligence about which doors were left unlocked and which areas of the property were least monitored. From a forensic perspective, an unlatched door complicates searches. If someone used that entry, they may also have tracked dirt, automotive fluids, or other trace evidence into the basement or inside the house. But if the family moved items or cleaned once they realized a child was missing, some of those traces could be erased. That's why detectives take early, documented statements and note the condition of entrances immediately. It preserves the record of how the home looked before any uncoordinated touch-ups. Beyond the tactical angle, an unlatched door changes how investigators model timelines. With a direct, quiet path into the home, the need for a struggle outside diminishes, and the absence of loud noise becomes easier to explain. For the family, that fact is devastating. Something as simple as a door left unsecured can become the missing piece that turns a routine afternoon into a nightmare. A neighbor heard a scream, a car door slam, and a vehicle leaving near the time she vanished. Eyewitness reports can be unreliable in detail but indispensable in building a timeline. On the afternoon Summer disappeared, a nearby neighbor reported hearing a scream, followed by a slamming car door and the sound of a vehicle accelerating away. Those sensory impressions, a voice, an impact of metal, and the rush of an engine, are raw, immediate clues that place energetic movement at a moment when the household expected stillness. Police interviewed this neighbor and others in the immediate aftermath. Statements like these are invaluable because they can be time-stamped against known events, cell phone pings, utility workers' logs, and the family's own recollections. Even when the description of sound is vague, the relative timing is critical. If the scream coincides with the brief 2-minute window investigators believe Summer disappeared in, it narrows the period detectives must scrutinize for vehicle movement and for traces like tire marks or amplified engine sounds from dashcam footage of passing drivers. Neighbors' recollections are not infallible. Memory under stress distorts, and ambient noises can be misinterpreted. But corroboration matters. If multiple neighbors heard similar things, footsteps, doors, engines, a clearer picture emerges. Investigators will canvass additional houses for surveillance cameras, Ring doorbell footage, or dashcam captures from passing drivers who may have recorded a vehicle leaving at speed. The sound of a vehicle accelerating away matters for another reason. It supports the theory of a quick exit. A slow, creeping departure is more consistent with hesitancy or with someone helping. A rapid escape suggests an intent to leave the scene as quickly as possible, possibly after an act that needed to be hidden. If the vehicle itself can be identified, make, model, color, that opens another path, license plate recognitions, toll records, and witnesses who may have seen the car on nearby roads. In the weeks and months after the disappearance, law enforcement used these neighborhood reports to focus searches and to chase down any car sightings. The presence of the scream and the slamming door remains a dramatic detail because it helps explain how something so sudden could occur. It wasn't silent, but the noise may have been brief enough to be missed by many and only recorded by a few attentive neighbors. Dogs on the property did not bark, suggesting the person was familiar and accepted by them. One of the more unsettling details in the case is the dog's behavior. Typically, dogs react loudly to unknown intruders, barking, running to the fence, or pulling at doors. But on the day Summer vanished, witnesses say the family dogs did not raise a commotion. That silence has been interpreted by some as a signal that a person the dogs knew, or at least had been exposed to repeatedly, was present. Dogs are reliable indicators of normalcy and threat because they react to scent, sight, and tone. A calm or familiar presence will often produce curiosity rather than alarm. Investigators do not leap from quiet dogs to immediate guilt. Rather, they treat canine behavior as one of many contextual clues. Dogs that fail to bark can mean several things. The animal was inside and detached from the event, it was distracted, it recognized the person, or it had been trained to remain silent under certain calls or cues. Determining which of these possibilities is accurate requires detailed interviews about how the dogs usually react, where they were that afternoon, and whether anyone else on the property, workers, neighbors, or family friends, had regular contact with them. If the dogs had previously met the person who later took Summer, their silence becomes a critical piece of the puzzle. It suggests access and familiarity were established long enough for the animals to accept the individual. For investigators, that raises the possibility that the abductor was not a complete stranger but someone who moved through the property without generating suspicion. That narrows suspect profiles and changes the focus of interviews. Who fed the dogs, who came into the yard without special announcement, and who had earned the animal's trust. It's also possible to explain quiet dogs without implying a person was known. Some dogs, especially older or lethargic ones, may not bark, and certain breeds are less vocal. Environmental factors, noise from equipment or nearby traffic, can suppress barking. Forensically, detectives will combine the dog's behavior with other evidence, footprints, scent trails, and eyewitness reports to weigh whether an accepted presence or a silent, opportunistic abduction best fits the facts. Summer disappeared within a 2-minute window, pointing to a precise and pre-planned abduction. The most chilling forensic conclusion is the tightness of the disappearance window. Witnesses and family statements place the time between checks at roughly 2 minutes. In missing child cases, a 2-minute opportunity is tiny, but it's long enough for a carefully planned abduction executed by someone who had rehearsed the approach, the entry, and the exit. A 2-minute window suggests premeditation because it requires speed, efficiency, and confidence. The abductor must have known where the child would be, how to approach without alerting others, and how to move the child to a vehicle or interior space rapidly. That degree of precision points away from random wandering or spontaneous stranger encounters. It's the kind of brief, surgical action consistent with someone who knew the property and the vulnerability points they could exploit. An unlocked door, a quiet side yard, or the presence of trusted workers who could be used as cover. Investigators treat such a window as both constraint and advantage. Constraint, because it limits the time frame for searches and cross-checks. Advantage, because it focuses forensic teams on a narrow period for phone pings, security footage, and neighbor observations. A 2-minute event also changes the behavioral profile of suspects. Likely adults with experience moving quickly and an understanding of how to manage a child without prolonged struggle. That narrows the suspect set to people with physical capability and familiarity with the environment, again shifting attention to those who had legitimate reason to be on the property. Search dogs tracked her scent to the road, where it ended abruptly, suggesting vehicle involvement. Tracking dogs followed a scent trail from the property onto the access road but then lost the trail where it would have merged with tire tracks or vehicle movement. Canine scent work is not infallible, but it is highly useful in narrowing movement direction. Dogs can follow the unique odor of a person across varied terrain, pointing searchers to likely pathways or indicating whether a child left on foot or was placed into a vehicle. In this case, the scent trail ending where the house's path met the road has been interpreted as consistent with someone placing Summer into a vehicle and driving away. A human walking away usually leaves a prolonged scent path. A vehicle can abruptly remove or mask scent by accelerating, rolling over the path, or moving the child entirely out of the immediate area. Investigators examine tracks, look for tire impressions, and attempt to locate dashcam or traffic camera footage that could corroborate a vehicle exit at speed. There are caveats. Weather, the presence of other animals, and the passage of time can degrade scent, creating false endings. Contamination by other search teams, volunteers, or vehicles can also confuse a trail. Still, the combination of a scent path reaching the road and then dissipating is a classic indicator in cases where a vehicle played a role. Accident or wandering off theories collapse due to lack of evidence and difficult terrain. Given the rural, wooded terrain around the Wells property, initial hypotheses included both accidental wandering and being lost in the woods. However, exhaustive searches turned up no clothing, no toy, no human remains, and no convincing trail of a child traversing the underbrush. The lack of physical evidence where one would expect it, a dropped toy, a flattened patch of brush, shoe prints, weakens those theories. The Appalachian foothills and ravines are not forgiving. A lost child usually leaves signs. Search teams scoured creeks, wells, drainages, and hollowed areas with dogs, drones, and human lines. If Summer had wandered and become trapped or injured, the environment makes discovery more likely over hours and days, not less. The absence of such signs therefore shifts investigative plausibility toward an active removal scenario. Someone took her, not the land itself. Family involvement appears unlikely due to immediate 911 call, no cleanup, and no delay in reporting. The question of family involvement is delicate and consequential. In this case, certain actions, the quick 911 call, visible and earnest cooperation with search teams, and no immediate signs of staged cleanup, argue against the idea that a parent or caregiver intentionally hid or harmed the child and then tried to cover it up. For investigators, the timing and nature of initial calls, the family's demeanor during searches, and the absence of obvious staging are all factors that reduce, though do not eliminate, suspicion of family culpability. Detectives always examine household behavior carefully. Did people move items, alter the scene, or give inconsistent accounts? In the Wells case, authorities have publicly said they treated the family as cooperative, even while continuing to explore all leads. It's a balance of respect for grieving relatives and thoroughness in pursuing every possible explanation. 3 possible abductor profiles emerge: predator, opportunist, or trafficker. When investigators build suspect profiles, they broadly consider 3 archetypes that fit the observed facts here. A predator is someone who has studied the family or area and planned an abduction for sexual or violent purposes. An opportunist is a person who saw a short, exploitable chance and took it, perhaps someone passing by, a worker who spotted an unsupervised child, or a transient with poor impulse control. A trafficker implies a different motive, the removal of a child to move them to an organized network for exploitation, which often requires coordination, transport, and concealment. Each profile carries different investigative needs. Predators often leave a trail of prior offenses or suspicious behavior. Opportunists might be identified via nearby vehicle records or local witnesses. Traffickers suggest movement across regions and the need to check larger networks, transit routes, and online activity. Right now, investigators must weigh the evidence: the 2-minute window, the scent trail to the road, the dog's silence, and the worker's presence, to prioritize resources. Takeaways. The disappearance of Summer Wells reads as a carefully executed removal rather than a tragic accident or aimless wandering. The combination of an unlocked basement door, regular workers on the property, neighbors' reports of a scream and a fast departure, dogs that did not alert, and a scent trail that ends at the road all point to a brief, deliberate action with a rapid exit. The kind of operation that typically requires prior knowledge and planning. That said, nothing here is a closed case. Investigators continue to analyze phone records, vehicle data, workers' logs, and witness statements. For the public, the key role is restraint. Avoid speculation that could damage evidence or traumatize the family, and instead provide concrete tips to law enforcement if you saw something specific on June 15, 2021, such as a vehicle description, time-stamped photos, or footage that places someone near the property at the critical time. If you have verifiable information, contact the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation or your local authorities and reference the Summer Wells case. Small details, a license plate partial, a worker's name, a dashcam clip, can shift a theory into evidence. This disappearance occurred in a sliver of time that can be rechecked and remapped. That's why thorough, patient investigation matters. We will continue to follow developments closely. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you'll be among the first to know when investigators release verified updates. This is a story about a child who deserves answers, and about a community and nation watching for the truth.